Hi, my name is Buzzy Anderson, and I attend University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And this is my final project for Educational Leadership 902, Quantitative Research Methods. According to Geist, Erickson, Greer, and Hatch of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, there are more than 100,000 students in U.S. public schools that are not able to communicate across purposes, partners, and topics using speech, sign language, or graphic symbols. These are students with significant cognitive disabilities and require extensive and repeated individualized instruction. These students may benefit from a focus on building understanding and use of symbolic communication to support their meaningful engagement across the curriculum and the school day. Communication is their basic human right. I want to be a voice for the voiceless, and through this research, I believe I can. The purpose of this study is to find out how and if core words are used in site-based classrooms in my district, and what, if any, impact that may have on functional communication skills for students with non-traditional communication modalities, such as those who use AAC devices for communication. How many different words do you think you speak in a day? How many words are fundamental to those conversations? What are the core words? The core words are words that we use every day. I want you to think about that 85% of what we speak can be expressed in about 250 words. Words like finished, turn, go, look, different, stop are examples of these types of words. I wanted to find out if the teachers in my district thought that the core was useful, effective, or even important. And if they weren't using it, why they weren't using it. The method to my madness. My respondents were special education teachers that work in Federal Setting 3 DCD, ASD, or OHD classrooms, where the students spend more than 60% of their day outside of the regular or general education classroom. Gender, race, ethnicity, or culture did not necessarily have a place in my research, but there may be a way to address it later on in a deeper study. I sent out surveys to 20 teachers. 11 teachers responded, 8 teachers from my district, Edina Public Schools. Another colleague sent out some surveys in another district, and another colleague sent out some in Minneapolis Public Schools. The instrumentation that I used to collect the data was a survey. This form of data collection is an effective beginning to this kind of research. Effective follow-up would be to perform interviews, to ask questions, and get explanations for definitions from the respondents so that I might understand why and how to help them implement the core. I was able to obtain permission through my supervisor, assistant principal Mike Protaski. I included a consent in the survey. My respondents were adults, and they were willing to give me their emails. Honestly, I didn't even consider the anonymity of the respondents because I didn't feel that the information was anything that would threaten the personal safety of the respondents. I sent out the survey on Monday, November 23rd, 2020, and asked for it back on November 30th, 2020. 11 people responded to my survey, or 50%. The first thing that I did was read through the responses. I studied important types of data analysis for this type of study and found that mean, median, and standard deviation might be important statistics from the respondents. At this point, I still am analyzing the data. I also made some simple correlations from what was collected. So then what I did was I coded the data into Likert scales and analyzed for mean, median, and standard deviation, and looked at any correlations. One of the questions that I asked teachers was if they use the core vocabulary. I thought it would be an important first step to understanding what teachers were doing and how they were feeling about this subject. In this chart, it shows that 18%, or 2 respondents, don't use the core in their classrooms. Of those 2 respondents that said no, that they do not have a core board, one of those teachers uses it, but the other teacher does not. I know that both of these teachers teach students who are of higher cognitive ability than my students. The next thing I asked was about their perceptions of usefulness. Another teacher that has a core board in his classroom does not use the core board. Responded that he did not like it or think that it was effective for his students. I know that this teacher has students whose bodies are complicated and are not all nonverbal and have simplified augmentative communication devices that do not have all the core words on them. As Geist and Hatch encouraged on the Project Core website, the core needs to be used to talk about infinite topics and activities generalized across all academic and daily routines and useful for all communication purposes, including obtaining things, activities that are desired, refusing things that are not desired, and interacting with socially and seeking and sharing information. Next, I asked the teachers how effective that they thought the core was. One of the respondents who has a core board in his room does think the core is useful, but not effective for his students. Nearly 70% of the respondents said that they were able to use the core throughout the day, always, frequently, or sometimes. There were barriers, however, to the core vocabulary use, which is discussed in a later slide. Because we are in the middle of a pandemic, the service model that is being used and implemented for students with disabilities is distance learning. More can be learned about the effectiveness of distance learning overall. However, from my own experience and the experience of my students, the progress that we are making, especially in the area of communication, is minimal. More than half of the respondents answered that distance learning will negatively affect the implementation of the core. A parent once expressed to me that they did not use or need to use their child's device for communication at home because we know what he wants. I told them that they were doing him a great disservice. What conclusions can be drawn from this initial research? According to Geist and Hatch, the core is useful for students with cognitive disabilities and gives them the ability to communicate across settings and with various partners. However, there are barriers to implementation. Some barriers to implementation include planning time and staff buy-in. Before you decide about whether you think teachers should be teaching the core, I would like you to check out John, a student who uses an AAC device to communicate. You can click on the link to see what happened to John, but I will read to you what John said on his AAC device. It was time to eat. I wait and wait. No one there. No one come. I afraid no one here would help me eat. I wait more. He come and say to me, you don't tell. He bad and mean. He go away. I wait more. The caregiver received a disciplinary action. Would the fact that teachers are saying that the core is ineffective have anything to do with lack of training or understanding of how to use it and the research behind it? What are some next steps? With exposure and training, would I be able to influence attitudes of special education teachers, my colleagues, and maybe even some gen ed teachers about the use of core vocabulary and its use and effectiveness for students with disabilities. Here are my next steps. Teach teachers and other staff how to be responsive partners. Give students personal access to aided augmentative communication devices with core vocabulary, and use aided language input strategies to show students what is possible and how to use graphic symbols on aided AAC devices. Thanks for watching.